For the past few days, Uncle Oot was not happy. He was deeply troubled and frustrated because thieves had stolen his flock of young chickens from the coop. It was strange because the chicken coop was right next to his room and his younger brother's, who was bedridden with an illness. Yet the chickens were still gone. They were stolen so silently, as if nothing had happened. There wasn't a sound, not a single squawk. Not even his usually sharp-eared dog, Lou, barked. The more he thought about it, the more furious Uncle Oot became. He wondered if he was born under a bad omen for livestock. As he hadn't had any chicken to eat for the past 3 Tet holidays. It had been a long time since his parents passed away, leaving behind his half-dead brother, that he had tasted meat. Sometimes a fox would eat all the chickens, leaving only a handful of blood-soaked feathers scattered in the coop. A few blood-stained feathers were even cunningly carried by the fox to the floor by his and his brother's bed. Other times, a thief would sneak in while he was in the fields and steal the chickens. His brother was truly useless. All day long, he just stared wide-eyed and grinned with his crooked mouth, but he never spoke. If only he could talk, maybe the foxes would be afraid of the human voice and wouldn't dare come near. He couldn't walk either. If he could hear footsteps, maybe their house wouldn't have been robbed. But they were robbed in broad daylight. But then again, he shouldn't blame his brother. If he had to blame someone, he would blame fate for bringing such an imperfect creature into the world. He couldn't even use his limbs for eating or personal hygiene. A few years ago, the doctors from the Western schools, friends of the village chief, had talked about his brother's condition. They mentioned something about brain degeneration or paralysis, but Uncle Oot didn't understand. He was born a tenant farmer, and so were his parents. How could he possibly understand the complex affairs of the upper class? After calming down for a moment, Uncle Oot hurried into the house, grabbed his machete, and went to chop bamboo. The bamboo on the landlord's property was plentiful, but tenant farmers like him could only ask for the inner parts to use temporarily. The outer parts of the bamboo were chopped up to be woven into large baskets for storing rice. Sometimes bamboo was used to weave smaller baskets, sieves, or for making fishing rods. Wealthy landowners could use bamboo as they pleased, like a versatile commodity. But for a poor person like him, he could only ask for the inner bamboo to split and weave into mats or walls. His house walls were all made of bamboo mats. He would layer them where the walls were sturdy and use 2 or 3 layers in weaker spots to block the wind, keep the house warm, and protect against storms. With his skillful hands, Uncle Oot smoothly split a bamboo stalk into pieces. He used the tip of the machete to separate the ends into thin, small strips. Then he crushed the stalk to soften it and began to strip it into many small pieces, which he wove into the half-finished mat. When he was done, he placed the mat over a bamboo frame he had prepared a few days earlier. Using small strips and string, he tied them together. By the time the sun began to set, he had finished a rectangular door with a vertical brace that was about 2 handspans longer than the other. This way, he had a door for his house without having to waste money buying hinges at the market. He simply put the long post into a piece of bamboo he had buried deep in the ground and tied the top with a coconut fiber cord. Just like that, he had a revolving door that could open and close. The other day, because his house didn't have a back door, the dog, Lou, snuck in and ate half a pound of his meat. He was truly unlucky and fated to never have meat. A brother from a neighboring village, knowing he had been robbed and hadn't been successful with livestock for years, had gifted him half a pound of meat. But that damn dog dared to gobble up his precious half pound of meat. But it was strange. Lou had never been so brazen before. He could hunt rats and catch lizards, but he had never touched the food on the shelves. What possessed the dog to do such a thing? Since his brother, Bay, had grown up a bit, their lonely house in the quiet lane became even more deserted. The neighborhood kids didn't like coming to his house, afraid of seeing a pitiful yet terrifying person. And it was right for them to be scared of Bay. His pale face always had a grotesque smile. His glaring white eyes would stare at all the children with an unexplainable longing. It was impossible to tell what his eyes were looking at, as the whites were so large that his tiny pupils just kept darting around. His mouth was also odd. It was either twisted or drooped down with a long, dark red tongue whenever he laughed at someone. The kids in the village would whisper among themselves, "Uncle Ut's brother's tongue is too long. We don't even know if it's human." Of course, these things were whispered discreetly among everyone, young and old, because they were afraid of hurting Uncle Ut's feelings. But in this world, the more you whisper, the more likely it is to be heard. When Uncle Ut accidentally heard it, he didn't mind. He knew people were right to be scared of Bay, even though he loved him so much. Sometimes when he looked at him, he was frightened himself. People have their own destiny. Uncle Ut often said this when he had to care for his disabled brother, separated from the villagers. His brother had a miserable fate, and Uncle Ut was burdened with a blood relative he couldn't bear to abandon. There was no meat to eat. The main food in the house was fish from the fields. This sometimes made Uncle Ut feel more at ease. After all, there was an endless supply of fish in the fields. A few fishing rods were all he needed for a meal. But Bay was a picky eater. He was born into a tenant farmer's family, but acted as if he lived with the rich. He ate only a few grains of rice. Plain fish and fermented fish didn't satisfy him. One day, he was busy and hastily cooked a pot of fish after scooping out a few pieces for his brother. When he returned from his work, he saw that the fish wasn't fully cooked and smelled fishy and raw. Yet Bay had eaten all the fish in the bowl. Looking at his brother's eyes, Uncle Ut was astonished. It seemed the boy liked undercooked food. Normally, his cooked fish was delicious, but it never pleased his brother. He ate very little, but grew fast. The only problem was that he couldn't walk like a normal person. As he grew, he started to have a pungent smell of chickens and ducks. But he smelled like chickens and ducks, even though no chicken or duck ever lived long in their house because of the constant threat of foxes and daytime thieves. Neighbors also complained about their chickens and ducks disappearing constantly without knowing the cause. Uncle Ut noticed this too. Before, his neighbors' chickens and ducks would pass by his house, but each year, fewer and fewer came. Then they disappeared completely. Was it because the foxes were too rampant, or were the thieves becoming more cunning and devious? It was a common tragedy, but the whispers he overheard were getting harder and harder to bear. The old and young in the village said that his garden was haunted, that a ghost lived there that specialized in eating raw meat, which was why no chicken or duck could survive in that garden. Uncle Ut didn't bother with these rumors. He would leave for the fields in the morning and not return until late at night. In the morning, he would quickly cook rice and divide it into 2 portions, one for himself and one for his disabled brother. This meant he only had a little free time in the evening, sipping tea or a bit of wine. After that, he would fall asleep, waiting for the dawn. A farmer's sleep was heavy, but the rats in the house were acting up more and more. In his half-asleep state, he would hear them rummaging through pots and pans, which was very annoying. In the morning, the snakehead fish he had sun-dried for one day would be gone without a trace. What kind of rats were these? Like ghosts or demons? They always ate raw fish, but never touched the dried ones. Losing things for so long was painful. For many nights, Uncle Oot tried to stay awake to figure out what the rats looked like. As if they knew his intention, they became completely silent, as if they were never there. But when he was exhausted and just about to doze off, they would cause a ruckus. One night, the moonlight shone through a gap in the bamboo wall by the porch, illuminating the room dimly. In his dazed sleep, Uncle Oot thought he saw a red silk ribbon fluttering in the empty house. The ethereal ribbon would appear and disappear, vanishing the moment he opened his eyes wide. This happened many times, but he always dismissed it as a dream. One day, there was a memorial feast at a neighbor's house, and Uncle Oot was invited to eat. That day, he drank a bit too much and got completely drunk. When he got home, he fell onto his bed and immediately fell asleep. The 6-foot-wide bed was always big enough for both brothers. In the middle of the night, Uncle Oot suddenly woke up feeling a tickle on his cheek. Something soft and wet, like silk, was caressing his face. In his drunken stupor, Uncle Oot thought his dog, Lou, had jumped onto the bed to lick his face. But when he opened his eyes and looked carefully, he saw that it was the same red silk ribbon that had been haunting him every night, dancing and twisting. The red ribbon, the width of 3 fingers, fluttered and swayed, as if playing and teasing the face of a drunk man. Uncle Oot wanted to reach out and grab the ribbon, but his hand wouldn't obey. A drunk person's hand never obeys their will, especially when they've just woken up from a daze. The noise made the ribbon suddenly vanish, as if someone had pulled it into a dark place very close by. It seemed to be right next to where he was lying, where his brother, Bay, was silently looking at him. Uncle Oot stared at him, not understanding. Why was he still awake, staring at him like that? And why were his eyes so green? No, it wasn't green. In them was the flickering light of 2 fiery red marbles. Looking at him, Uncle Oot suddenly panicked and shouted, "What are you doing, Bay?" In the dead of night, his shout must have echoed loudly. It made Bay jump, and his face changed abruptly. The strange light in his eyes was gone. His lips drooped down as they usually did, but what was different was the look of regret on his face, as if he had just missed out on a child's game. "This isn't right. There's something very different about my brother. It's like he came from a dark place that no one can understand." Uncle Oot thought about this and stayed awake until the first rooster crowed. The next day, after finishing planting rice seedlings, Uncle Oot went straight to his brother's house in the next village. The 2 brothers were cousins, but they had been close since childhood and didn't hide anything from each other. "Brother Tam, I'm so worried. Bay at home is changing day by day, and I don't know what's happening to him. I don't know if I can handle this much longer," he sadly told his brother. Old Man Tam looked at his younger brother with sympathy mixed with worry. He had heard more about his nephew than his brother, but he didn't know how to start the conversation smoothly. "I know you're struggling because of him, but what else can you do? After all, he's our own flesh and blood." He paused, then fell silent. Uncle Oot told his brother about all the strange things that had been happening. Old Man Tam listened for a while, and then gave his brother a piece of advice. "Whatever you decide to do, you need to understand the root cause. I've heard many terrifying things about the boy, but I'm still skeptical. Sometimes I wanted to tell you, but I was afraid of making you sad. With just the 2 of you, you're always out in the fields, so you don't know what's going on at home. If you want to know what Bay is doing, you'll have to sneak and watch." After saying that, the old man quickly went into the house, took out a chicken with its legs tied, and handed it to Uncle Ut. "You look so pale. Take this chicken home and make some green bean porridge to eat. This is all I can help you with." Uncle Ut was only halfway home when it started to rain. The rain was heavy. Lightning flashed all over the sky. The path became slippery in the blinding light of the sky. When he got home, Uncle Ut quickly put the chicken in the coop and ran back to the fields. "I can't let the seedlings get washed away," he thought, and ran faster and faster. About 10 steps away from the fields, Uncle Ut suddenly stopped. It wasn't because he was tired. He just didn't want to go any further when he remembered his brother's words. "I have to sneak and watch. See what Bay does every time I go to the fields." The back door of the house was dimly visible in the rain and lightning. Lou didn't run out to greet him as usual. He wondered if the dog had run off with a neighbor's dog. When he was just 10 steps away from the door he had made to keep the foxes away from the chicken coop, Uncle Ut heard a chicken squawk loudly. "It's those cursed foxes again." Uncle Ut grabbed a stick, pushed the door open, and rushed in. The door with its makeshift hinge squeaked as it swung open, and before his eyes appeared the same ghostly silk ribbon from that night. It was longer and blood red in the blinding flashes of lightning. As soon as it heard the noise, the ribbon darted toward the front of the house very quickly. In a flash, it was gone. Uncle Ut looked into the chicken coop and saw only a tuft of blood-red feathers lying there. He quickly walked to the bed and saw Bay's face, as if he were sleeping. But strangely, there was a little blood on the corner of his mouth. It wasn't a fox that ate the chicken. The chicken died because of that red silk ribbon. But what was that ribbon? Why was there blood on Bay's mouth while he was sleeping? After that night, Uncle Ut started to pay attention to the many strange things happening in the house. For a farmer in the fields planting rice, getting bitten by leeches and bleeding was normal. For others, the leech bite would dry up in a day and be completely gone by the second day. But the leech bites on Uncle Ut's legs wouldn't heal. Instead, they would fester with pus and yellowish fluid. Sometimes it would last for a week or even a month without healing. Finally, he had no choice but to wrap it in traditional medicine to heal. Could it be because of that ribbon? Uncle Ut quickly dismissed the thought, thinking it was too bizarre. But in the end, what was it? So he began to brew a plan to get to the bottom of everything. In January, the fields were dry and scorched. This was the season after the rice had been harvested, so people were busy hunting rats and birds. Uncle Ut caught a lot of birds and grilled them, and they smelled delicious. But Bay wouldn't eat them. Lately, he had become visibly thinner. Looking at him, Uncle Ut felt a pang of sadness, for he knew that blood was thicker than water. One afternoon, a neighbor killed a pig and gave Uncle Ut a pound of meat. He tossed the meat onto a bamboo rack hanging in the kitchen, and then hurried off to set his fishing traps for the evening. After walking for a few rows of garden, he suddenly remembered the red silk ribbon and turned back. The door with the revolving hinge always squeaked, so Uncle Ut had put some mud on it. Thanks to this, the door didn't make a sound when he pushed it open. In the dim light, Uncle Ut saw the ribbon dancing in the kitchen. It looked like it was having a grand time and didn't notice his presence. Cautiously, silently, step by step, Uncle Ut approached the ribbon. The night sky in January was brightly lit with stars. The light from the stars shone through the holes in the roof, illuminating the silent kitchen. Uncle Ut's eyes were wide open, staring at the strange object, the thing that had haunted him for so many nights. the cause of the death of his chickens and ducks. And for 5 years, he hadn't tasted meat, all because of it. Anger, hatred, rage. It was all because of that demonic ribbon. Suddenly, he froze. A chill ran through him, as if he had been submerged in water for a long time. The ribbon looked like a tongue, with tiny taste buds protruding from its body. These tiny strands trembled, wiggled, and clawed at the meat on the kitchen rack. Then it disappeared toward the front of the house, only to reappear moments later. The action was repeated with the regular smacking sounds of a child enjoying a meal. Uncle Oot's head was spinning with thoughts. A human tongue? No way. A human tongue couldn't be that long. Just by estimating in the kitchen, it was over 3 meters long, not to mention where it came from. But it was clearly a tongue, not a silk ribbon. That tongue was licking the blood-red meat that was sitting there. And each time, the meat block would diminish before his eyes. Uncle Oot suddenly remembered the rumors and was horrified. His tongue went stiff as the red silk ribbon happily danced in front of the meat. His trembling hands fumbled in the darkness, searching for something. Anything he could get his hands on would give him courage in the face of his fear. The kitchen was empty. There was nothing within his reach. His shaking hand suddenly touched a warm spot. It was the embers from grilling the birds that afternoon. The warmth from the charcoal didn't make Uncle Oot less shaky. On the contrary, it added to his despair. He couldn't run away. His brother was still in the house, and so he lunged, gripping the disgusting ribbon tightly. The devil's tongue had been living off the meat in his house. The devil's tongue thrashed violently with a terrifying strength. Its body was slippery and covered in a slimy substance, making it even harder to hold on to. Uncle Oot was thrown into the embers. No matter what, he refused to let go. A thought flashed in his mind during the critical moment. He grabbed a handful of ashes and tightened his grip on the crazed ribbon. From the room came Bay's incoherent mumbling, mixed with the terrifying wails of the dog, Lou. The dog's wails were broken, trembling, and full of fear. Uncle Oot ignored everything, because now he had the tongue in his hands, which were covered in ashes. But it was so strong. It pushed him back and forth, dragging him into the bedroom. Bay grunted, choked, and thrashed his limbs around on the bed. The starlight shone through the rotten bamboo mat on the porch, illuminating Bay's face. When Uncle Oot saw it, he screamed in horror. Oh my God. He was no longer his brother. He was a demon with a long, hideous tongue, trying to wrap himself around his older brother. The tongue, which was at first trying to retract, now stretched forward, wrapping several times around Uncle Oot's neck. The tip of the tongue, covered in thick, rough slime, groped his face. Horrified by what was happening, Uncle Oot grabbed the sickle at the head of the bed and swung it. The sound of gongs and clappers echoed in the quiet night. The villagers by the stream near Uncle Oot's house screamed and shouted, calling for help to put out the fire. The fierce flames of the dry season rose high, illuminating the entire peaceful village. By the time people arrived, Uncle Oot's house was already reduced to ashes. The young men used coconut fronds to beat out the flames, trying to find the victims, but they found nothing but the sickle and a few broken pieces of pottery. People talked excitedly too, wondering if the people in the house had escaped or had been burned to ashes. Later, no one ever understood what had happened to the 2 unfortunate brothers. Among all the questions, there was one person who was always silent. That was Old Man Tam from the neighboring village. He was silent, not because he didn't know anything, and no one should blame an old man close to death for being so reserved. Because if he had not told the truth one day, how would we have this terrifying story?